Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and we are going to look at some new trigger. I guess you'd kind of call it a trigger shoe almost. A trigger, front trigger. They call it just a blade trigger. So this is a trigger that will work for the 160R, for the CS1s, the CSR, any of the triggers that have the what I'm going to call a shoe, even though it's not technically a trigger shoe, where you can remove the front of the trigger off and then put on a different style. Now, Planet Eclipse has released the CAD files for these, so you can actually, if you have a 3D printer, you can print your own trigger and make your own design if you really wanted to, but they've come out with the blade trigger for people to put onto their 160R or their CS1 that has that, that scythe style trigger on it. So I'm gonna put one on for you guys. We have three colors right here, black, the HDE, and the Flectarn. So we'll open this up. I'll show you how to get the trigger out, to change it, and then put the trigger back in so that you're not crushing or ruining anything. It's really, really simple, straightforward. You just have to be careful of a couple wires, but it's not hard and it doesn't take a lot of time. So let's open this one up. Let's get the barrel off. Need to take the bolt out. And then we have two screws we need to remove. So one in the back right there, and then one that is covered by the front grip over here. So let's pull off the front grip right there. And that's the screw we want to take out. If you have one of the newer style CSRs, or even some of the late model CS1s, I believe, they now have a pin that is right here. It goes through the battery housing and through the front frame or the front body, and then you can see it on the other side as well. If you have that, you need to remove that pin as well so that you can get the frame and body apart. If you don't have that on there, you don't need to do that. You can just usually push the pin out, but if they're brand new and the pin has never come out, you do kind of sometimes need to tap it out a little bit. So front frame screw, rear frame screw. And then once those are out, whoop, we can separate it right apart. So at this point, the wiring that comes from the board up here down the front is held in place by this horseshoe shaped wire tidy right here, and then drops down into the battery harness up here. So these are actually your power wires that are running along here. When we go to put it back together, we want to make sure that we don't crush those. So you do want to make sure that they are on the sides of the frame, and then they drop down and they are out of the way. So we'll be able to make sure that it goes together properly when we stick everything back together. And these literally just drop together like that. It's a very simple design how it goes together. Really quite genius. So to get the trigger out, you cannot take the shoe off from the outside. You have to remove the trigger up through the top. So we're going to take out the two screws that hold the trigger in. Being careful of the wires. And then we're going to push the trigger up through the top. But what we need to make sure of is that our wires go on each side of the trigger. The power wire and, well, both power wires, I should say. Not and, there's no and, it's just a red and black wire. So I'm gonna lift the black one over to the side and the red one over to this side. And I'm gonna grab the trigger from underneath with my hand, and I'm gonna kind of just ease it up. And as I ease it up, I'm gonna move the wires with my fingers back and forth like that so that they get out of the way. And then I can pull it up. Make sure that the wire, like right now, the black wire, you might not be able to see it, it's getting caught on the trigger. Just move it out of the way, slide it up. So now we've got our two screws, the spring assembly, which you can leave on there. If you wanted to take it off, you could. Let's say you took out the screws all the way instead of leaving them in the trigger like I did. Then the spring would pop right off there. So from this position, if we turn the trigger around to the back side, there's a screw in the middle, not the one up here. So not this one, not this one, not this one, but right here. Undo it. Pull it off. It's the same screw as the one we took off for the trigger, or for the spring. And at that point, the trigger will just come right off the shoe. Take this one, and we just lay it right on top. It has a little kind of indexed groove right there where it slots in, so it won't slide side to side. So we're going to make sure that it's lined up, put the screw back in, and tighten it down. What I've noticed over the many of these that I've taken apart for various projects and whatnot, is that when you're holding the two pieces together, that this trigger likes to slide down a little bit. And when you go to put the screw in, it doesn't line up, and you're just turning and wondering why it doesn't go together. It's because your trigger has slightly dropped down. The curvature of it makes it slide over. So you have to make sure that you kind of push it up into the apex back there and hold it in place and screw it together. But again, simple. Make sure it's snug, not overly tight. And there we go. Now we have that installed onto the trigger itself. You can go ahead and drop it back down through. Now we want to make sure that, again, our wire, one on one side, one on the other, so black and red separated out. And then we're going to drop it down in. There's a couple things you have to remember when you put this down in. First, don't crush your wires, obviously. Second, the little tab that you see at the bottom right here, this piece, the little hook that it looks like on there, that's the part of the trigger that breaks the sensor, the brake beam or the optic sensor on the trigger, on the board, that tells the gun to shoot if you're using the optic sensor option instead of the switch sensor. So when we push it down in there, dropping down like this, the micro switch sticks up and is in the way. If you just smash this down in there, this little tab can hit that micro switch, the leaf spring on the switch, and snap it right off. So as we push this down, we need to look inside here and make sure that the switch is staying out of the way and that the trigger slides around the switch. And then once we get that into the right spot where we've passed the switch or the micro switch with the hook, I'm going to call it, we're going to then move our wires out of the way again and just gently, ever so gently, bring our trigger all the way down. See our red wire, you can see our black wire is up to the side right there, but our red wire is passed underneath. So we want to get our pick, bring the red wire up to the side. Now we're going to do the same thing for our black wire. Do this so you guys can see it. Black wire, move it up to the side. There we go. So now our wiring is running over the top again. We didn't pull on it. We didn't yank it in any way to break it or cut it. We'll take our spring and set this back down in there too. Move our wires. You can actually put the spring assembly on and rest it on the trigger while you drop it in there. You don't need to do it in two pieces, but I did it anyway. And then put our screws back in. Making sure that the wire doesn't get trapped under the screw also, and that you pinch the wire with the head of the screw. Like that. The wiring running over the top is okay. It doesn't need to be like off to the side or anything like that. You can you can have the wire running over the top of the trigger. It's okay. We're going to put it together. Remember I said we got to be careful of where our wires are at the front. If everything's lined up super easy, you should be able to just push these two pieces together and they'll snap on. I can feel at the front right now that this piece, the solenoid up at the front, is pushing against the wires. And I want to make sure that that stays out of the way. So I'm going to move my wire tidy, make sure my wire tidy is underneath both rails. Make sure that my wiring for the batteries itself, so that's where this red and black wire carry all the way down, that they are to the side. And once I've done that, I'll put it back together again. You see how much easier that one went together? Just doop, dropped right into place. Put this one back in here. And put this one back in here. This. And that. It's that easy. Now I've got a new blade trigger on there. Super comfortable. Maybe you just like the feel of it better. Easy switch. Just pick one up and you can throw it on there. So they're available through the website. Check for color availability. I believe there's 4 different colors right now. Easy to install. Order yours now through ansgear.com.